In this episode of Cheap Tricks, we'll look at tape bleed. What is it? What causes it? And most importantly, what can we do to prevent it? So what do I mean when I'm talking about tape bleed? Well, I intentionally made a few mistakes on this panel, so let's take a closer look. A prime example of what I'm talking about is this area right here, and there's another one right there. The paint is creeping under the tape or it's being blown underneath the tape while you're spraying. There's another spot right here where I actually created another problem because I had taken an X-Acto knife and was lifting the tape to be sure that I got some tape bleed on this panel so I could show you guys what I was talking about. But with my X-Acto knife, I actually scraped off some of the underlying base coat. So having paint creep under your tape or bleed under your tape is something that happens to us all. It doesn't matter whether you're working on automotive graphics or just general airbrushing. It doesn't matter if you're a beginner at airbrushing or you've been doing this for years and years and years. It happens to us all. It can happen with tape, and not all tapes are created equal. We'll talk about that in a minute. It can happen with frisket. It can happen with your transfer paper or your transfer tape for your vinyl. And it can happen with your vinyl from your plotter. It happens. The most of the time, I prefer to work freehand. But there are times where I need to mask things off. For instance, if I'm working on a graphic, or sometimes even when I'm working freehand airbrush, it's easier and faster if I just mask an area off. So it can happen to any of us at any time. So now that we have a better understanding of what tape bleed is, let's look at what causes it. The first thing to consider is your substrate or the surface that you're painting on. Ideally, you want a super smooth surface. A super smooth surface like an automotive clear coat is less likely to induce tape bleed. I'm not saying it can't happen, but it is less likely. However, you have to weigh the pros and the cons. If you were to shoot a clear coat between each color of your graphic, not only are you increasing the cost of your materials, but you're also increasing your time because you have to let that cure between those coats. So on this panel, I didn't use any clear coat. I based it out with AutoWare's aluminum base, and I've got a lot of hot rod sparkle mixed into it. So it's relatively smooth, but there is a little bit of a texture there. So at a microscopic level, you've got little peaks and you have little valleys. When you tape over that, that can induce tape bleed. The next area to consider is the masking tape you choose to use. And I'm not talking about the blue painter's tape that you can buy at the big box store. Spend a little bit of extra money and buy good tape, either 3M or Scotch brand. Both those are good. The downfall with masking tape is if you look very closely at the separation line between the orange and the silver on this panel, you'll see it's pretty sharp, but there's just a hint of bleed between that line. The problem with masking tape is the edge can pick up lint. You're dealing with the little peaks and the valleys in that panel, and like I said, it creates a nice sharp line, but it's not perfect. If you're going to stripe over this, then it's going to be fine. But if you want a super clean, crisp edge, I recommend going with the vinyl tape. This is a little bit crude. I threw this together in just a couple minutes, but it shows you guys the difference between some of these tapes. So I've got 3M masking tape, I've got Scotch fine line, 3M vinyl, and FBS vinyl tape. If you look at the masking tape, if you try to pull a tight curve, it starts to wrinkle and bunch up on you. The same with the Scotch fine line tape. Now you could alleviate that by using a thinner tape like an 1/8 inch versus a 1/4 inch, but this shows you that you can pull a lot tighter curve with the vinyl tapes than you can with the fine line or even the masking tape. I'm not sure if the camera will pick this up or not, but the edge of the masking tape is not as sharp either. We were looking at that between the orange and the silver separation earlier. If I want a super sharp separation line between two colors, I will use the fine line with Scotch or one of the vinyl tapes. My favorite out of all these is the FBS. That's what I use more than anything else. The one thing you need to watch out for with the vinyl tapes is they stretch very easily. If you stretch it out too much, it will try to retract over a short period of time back to its normal length. So it'll start to lift in areas, and that will give you the tape bleed. Same is true with vinyl or frisket or your transfer tapes and your transfer papers. On a flat surface, you can lay those down pretty smoothly. You'll still get a few air pockets here and there, but if you're trying to do that over a rounded surface like a helmet or a motorcycle tank, it becomes more of a problem. The more trapped air you have underneath the vinyl or the tape or the paper, whatever the case may be, those air pockets are putting pressure on the vinyl and it will try to lift. So you have to be vigilant and watch out for your edges before you actually start to spray. The cheap trick behind this entire video is using an intercoat clear. Now everything I spray is Createx water-based products, so I will use either a transparent base or the 40-30 intercoat clear. If you're spraying a solvent-based system, you can use a solvent-based intercoat clear. The idea is once you've masked off your graphic, you spray a light 1 or 2 coats of an intercoat clear before you lay down the color, and if there's a potential for a paint bleed anywhere, the intercoat clear should bleed in underneath the tape and block the next color from bleeding. So I'm going to flip this panel over, remask the same design, and then we'll try the intercoat clear. So I'm using the FBS vinyl masking tape for this. Be sure and burnish the tape on good. You might notice that this is backwards from the other side of the panel, and that's because I'm using this to film 2 different videos. When it comes time to cut your tape, I use an X-Acto knife with a brand new blade every time. These things dull out pretty quick, and with a dull blade you run the risk of cutting all the way through the tape and into the surface that you're painting on, which is never good. It can cause delamination issues later. And I'll use the tape as the guide to get a good straight clean cut. And then where it overlaps, I can pull up about halfway, just lay the knife on there and pull the tape against the blade, and it gives me a nice super clean cut. The vinyl tape is also easier to cut through versus just regular masking tape. You get a cleaner edge with the vinyl tape as well when you have sharp corners like this, or if you don't plan on striping around it, this gives you a way cleaner appearance in the end. So we're just about ready to spray. Now some of you may be looking at this saying, wait a minute, that masking doesn't look anything like it did just a second ago. Here's what it looked like before. And this is what it looks like now. And there's a reason behind that. It's a bonus cheat trick. If you paid attention during the title sequence of this video, you will have seen me paint the blue first and then the orange. What happens when you paint a darker color first and then a lighter color next is you can get the edges to overlap. It looks like this. Now, if you really take your time masking all this off, you can avoid that, but it's a whole lot easier and faster if you can work from your lighter colors to your darker colors. So I've remasked the areas around the orange so that I can paint the orange first. So off camera, I'll go ahead and finish masking this off, and then we'll start spraying. So I've got this masked off well enough that I think I can avoid any overspray. And I've mixed up some Wicked transparent base 1:1 with the 4012 reducer. And I'm not concerned with trying to coat this entire area with the transparent base. I just want to go 1 or 2 light coats along the edge of all the tape lines. And the likelihood when you're using the vinyl tape of getting a tape bleed goes down significantly, but an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So I'll spray a lit 1 or 2 coats of the transparent base on here. We'll let that dry and then we'll start spraying the orange. The transparent base has had about 10 to 15 minutes to dry now, and I also use the air from the airbrush to dry in between coats. The orange that I'm using is AutoAir's Sparklescent Mango. You can see from the bottom of the bottle it's extremely bright. It's a pretty transparent color. It'll be muted some because of the aluminum base coat, and it'll probably take 6 or 7 coats to completely cover the aluminum. It's very important, especially with a multi-layer graphic like this, to work in very light layers. That goes without saying with water-based paints, but it's especially true if you're working with a solvent-based system, because gravity will take over. If you hose a lot of paint on here, gravity is going to bring that paint down, and you're going to have a high ridge line against all your tape marks on the bottom portion of the panel. In the end, when we unmask all this, ideally you don't want to feel the paint separation between those lines. A slight separation or feeling it a little bit is fine, but you don't want a high ridge line because that would cost you a lot more in clear coat to bury all that, and it can also affect your striping if you're going to stripe through there. So I'll start spraying this and then we'll unmask, mask off the blue areas and go from there. You know, use the air to dry between coats. I gave the orange a couple hours to dry because I knew I was going to be masking over it again. So now it's the same process. I'll go over the masked edges with 1 or 2 light coats of transparent base, followed by the blue. Drying in between with the air from the airbrush. You might notice that you can still see some of the orange as overlap. That's what I was talking about before, how it's easier to work from the lighter colors to the darker colors because I was a little bit off on the masking for the orange. Now I can cover that up with the blue and you'll never know that that was an issue before. This is the metallic midnight blue from Auto Air Colors. And there's the final result. The lines are cleaner and more crisp than the other side of this panel. There are a few little flaws. I didn't spend an enormous amount of time on this. This was just a test panel done specifically for this video. The goal was to show you guys that you can use an intercoat clear or a transparent base to achieve very clean masked lines. The panel's a little bit plain at this point. We'll have some more fun with this in the future. Until then, thanks for watching. Remember to like, subscribe, and share if you got something out of this, and I'll see you guys next time.